Welcome to the Nat and Sarah Show, where we aim to touch, move, and inspire you every single week. Really? We're really going to introduce our own show? Maybe we should leave it to the pro.
Oh my gosh. Okay. 1 second, ladies. Here we go. Sarah Maxwell and Natalie Cook are experts in visualization and deliberate use of the law of attraction. As dynamic world athletes representing Canada and Australia in beach volleyball, they honed in on achievement at the highest level. Winning an Olympic gold medal on her home beach of Bondi is a pinnacle example. Their powerful techniques transmute the spiritual to the tangible, allowing thousands of their community members to bring their vision boards to life. Recently, they've taken their expertise on the road as the full-time family, where they inspire, coach, and lead people to create their unique, deliberate family life using a simplified 3-step process. Welcome to the Nat and Sarah Show. Join us for twice-weekly episodes. Each week, Nat and Sarah will teach us how to deliberately create results in all areas of life using their unique 3-step process. Not only that, they'll also sit down with some of their favorite high achievers who have manifested what most merely dream about. Are you a member of the community? Go to bit.ly/The Nat and Sarah Show to download your 3-step journal to follow along with each workshop-style teaching episode and get ready to take action on your inspirations.
Hey dreamers! I know Nat is a little jealous that I get to speak to today's guest because she loves engaging with him. And I told him that before I pressed record. Whenever she comes home from a meeting with him, she is uplifted and full of ideas for the future. True story. And I really believe that's a testament to who this man is. He opens people's eyes to possibility. What a gift. So the conversation continues today with a creative mind who seems to be able to pick winners and then invest in them. I get the notion that he may have some superpowers, and I can't wait to find out if there's a strategy behind it and whether he'll share it with us or not. So he's been working in marketing strategy and implementation for the past 15 years. And this man seems to marry client and agency in a functional environment where he now leads a team of more than 50 staff. And if it's not 50 staff, that's Nat's fault, because that's what she told me. So 2018 was a big year for this maestro, as he was a finalist in the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Awards in Australia. He claimed the Transport and Logistics Business of the Year at the Optus myBusiness Awards. And Nat and I are so grateful that you're spending some time in our community of dreamers. We have really been delving into these laws of manifestation and our 3-step process that involves cultivating our inner dreamer again, then creating a whole new life story, which then asks us to act as if we're already living that story. And then we map out the plan for that dream and then adhere it all together with focus. And now here we are, cannonballing straight into entrepreneurialism, a word that I hope I don't have to say too many times. It was important that our community not get stuck in their heads, but continue energizing their ideas, visions, dreams to create something tangible into the world. So no pressure, Mark. You are here to kick their creativity into gear so they begin to see that business is an awesome vehicle to live their dream life. So Mark, how did your journey begin as an entrepreneur?
Wow. Thank you firstly for an amazing intro. Hopefully I can live up to that over the course
no
of the next
pressure, brother.
minutes.
Let's go.
Yeah. I don't think it was a conscious starting point. It was just a realization within myself a long time ago. I knew I wanted to make a mark on the world, and how that manifested when I was in high school and then through university was really different. So I thought initially I wanted to be a lawyer, forgive me. And even more devastating after that, at university, I thought I wanted to be a politician. And then I realized that neither were particularly good ways to really achieve what I wanted. I felt that both realms, the former was within the constraints of the canon of law, and politics was within the constraints of the prevailing winds at the time. So you don't really get to exercise the principles of who you are as a person in either context. And honestly, my 22, 23-year-old brain wasn't articulating it like this, but with a lot of hindsight, that's how I've come to realize it. So I started in a sales role, and sales is an incredible skill set, regardless of if you're in business or not, because sales is not only about the articulation of an idea or a service or a product. It's also an ability to interrelate with people, remove your fear of rejection, and also to just work the numbers around something. And I've got a bit of a model that I use for our new salespeople in our group, or people who enter sort of our space, and that's I often say 100 phone calls, 5 meetings, 1 sale, and it's simply about rinsing and repeating. So look, I started in sales and you'll laugh, Sarah, I started in sales at JB Hi-Fi in Brisbane, and I was selling car stereo systems. And I realized I loved that more than what I was doing at university. And post-university, I ended up staying there an extra year, and it felt like a stupid decision at the time, but it's only now later in life, as I am rapidly approaching 40, do I realize how important that formative experience was on a retail floor of a car stereo sales business in Brisbane. And I'll dig into that a little bit more later. But after that, I went and thought I'd get a bit more serious, and I'll knuckle down and I'll get a grad role, as you know, you're expected to do as a graduate of a business course. And I always found myself wanting to improve the status quo. And how that manifested was I would often find myself being the last person to leave the office, which is really weird for a 22 or 23-year-old, particularly a 22 or a 23-year-old at a fairly traditional business in a bit of a backwater town in Brisbane versus global cities like New York and London and so on. Anyway, I recall staying late one night and the CFO coming and seeing me, and it would often be just me and him, this new graduate and this career CFO, and we built up a bit of a relationship. And he often observed to me that, you know, you keep doing this and you'll go far. And I didn't really know what that meant. And go far up the organization chain, move quickly through a set organizational structure a little quicker. But I began to realize as my 20s progressed and my 30s started that going far was only limited by what you could imagine. And an organization's a fantastic vehicle for you to be exposed to things and travel the world and meet people and challenge yourself. But sometimes you outgrow an organization, or you're moving at a pace that an organization's typical promotion of a person or a young person coming through the ranks can't keep up with. And that was my point where I knew, Sarah, and it was funny, I actually was working for Coca-Cola, one of the biggest brands in the world. And I still have an enormous amount of thanks that I got to learn my marketing skill set from a business with such enormous pedigree. They wrote the rule book. But I felt myself outpacing the very business that was employing me at the time. And I made a decision to go into small business in my late 20s because I felt that that would be a better vehicle for me. And when I was in small business, then I realized that I was only truly limited by my own merit, my own effort, and a little bit of luck as well. So I'd have to say at my late 20s was when I realized that I was an entrepreneur. And may I say, for the record, I really hate that word. And I really do, because it's taken on a life of its own in 2018, 19. For me, and I've said this to a few people and I've had no one disagree with me yet, entrepreneurialism, and I've done it too.
It's hard. It's not an easy word. I'm so glad you're going to define it for you, what it means.
Because it's French. But entrepreneurialism is something that should be bestowed on you by other people. And I feel the same way about leadership. If you self-proclaim it, you devalue it. So if you say I'm a leader, then you devalue the whole concept of leadership, because leadership should be an observation that's bestowed by others in the context of you being meritorious and someone worth following. And entrepreneurship, I feel, is something in a similar context where you go, that person has entrepreneurial qualities. And we can talk about what I think those are in this interview if you like. But I think if you self-proclaim that you're an entrepreneur, you devalue the very concept of entrepreneurship as well. And it's really one of those things that needs to be bestowed through observation of your peers. And it really means something when you're nominated as an entrepreneur by people that you respect.
So we may fine-tune the definition through this question, because you were talking about outpacing your current employment.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? So you're in an environment, I'm sure they're giving you, goals or quotas or perhaps when you say outpace, are you talking creativity, like the things that you were thinking about that you wanted to implement, or what do you mean outpace?
Yeah, sure. So look, the organizations have developed a really useful toolkit to remove risk. And one of the riskiest things you can do is put a young person into a role where their decisions can affect the lives of fellow employees, or in the case of a publicly traded business or a private business, affect the profitability that shareholders would enjoy or the owner would enjoy. So if you're going up through a traditional organization, they always play it safe with regards to your career. And let me use we were talking about Nat Cook earlier. Let me use an analogy. You would never get 4 people into a metal missile to go down a sleeve made of ice at more than 100 kilometers an hour. If you progressed with safety, there has to be times where you can test yourself. And an organization in a traditional context is not an environment that it has an amount of risk appetite. So to come back to your question, was it that I was more creative or the like? The answer was no. The answer was I felt that, and I don't want this to sound arrogant, and I hope it doesn't, but I felt that a lot of the times that I was doing tasks that I had already mastered. And I know this is a thing that's often millennials are tarred with, like, oh, you've done it once or twice, therefore you think you're a master of it. But I felt that I had so much more to offer the business, and I didn't have the platform where my voice could be heard by the people who had the power to make that happen, or the influence to make that happen. So I felt going outside of a traditional organizational structure would be the fastest way for me to realize who I was as a person, as a human, and realize the potential. And I have to note as well, Sarah, it's really important that organizations in my late 20s, which was 10 years ago, have adapted so much in the last 10 years. And I suspect that if I was in the same role now, doing the same thing, I suspect I would progress at a faster rate that was to my satisfaction, that didn't frustrate me because I felt my wings were clipped as I did 10 years ago. So entrepreneurialism has started to permeate into traditional organizations as well. So I think it'll be a really different experience these days.
So
does that answer the question?
Totally does.
Yeah,
and you've introduced some other ideas around risk, because I feel that this is something that the entrepreneur takes on that is sometimes, so I want to you mentioned a couple of things. You said with your sales force, you have that kind of strategy that you run them through, the 100 calls. And so it's 105 and 1. So there are 5 meetings and 1 conversion. That was not what you said. One sale.
One sale. Yeah.
So am I to get that you have a capacity for risk, meaning you're able to take that risk on and move forward?
Yes, undoubtedly. And the important thing about risk, and you'll hear a very prolific and well-followed internet personality, Gary Vee or Gary Vaynerchuk, talk about this a lot. What is risk? You need to define it first. And for both you and I, we grow up in the Anglosphere, right? So we're white people. We have white values appointed to us, and that's the context that we grow up in, right? And if you grow up in different cultures, you have different, as a mean, as like the bell curve of people when they come up through life, you have different amounts of risk aversion. So for us, I'm a white male, and traditionally we have been the people who have had the greatest amount of risk appetite, because it would be okay for you to try and have a go as a white male. So I think that's important in terms of context if we're talking in 2019, around how do people assess their risk appetite, first of all. And I think it's very, very different for a white female. And then I think it's very, very different again for people of color as well. So how do they assess risk? And I don't have an answer to that because I don't have their lived experience. The only thing I do know is that I suspect it's really, really different. And I think that we would have a lot more creativity and people with risk appetite if we can work out whatever the recipe is that allows people to take risk in the context of their upbringing.
I want to insert something,
Sure.
a sporting comparison there, because over all the years that Nat and I played on the pro tour, one of the top teams in the world is from Brazil.
Yeah.
And when we first travel there, you really get exposed to a different context of life. I've never felt the fear the way I did around my safety. And when you talk to the players about it, it was just sort of the way it is. They live inside of, for example, they would say to me, Sarah, when you go shopping, you never leave your bags in the car. Like, you just don't do that. You never even plan your trip that way. You know that if you're going to go shopping, you go straight home. You know that you don't wear your certain jewelry out on the street. You know where, your bike, if you're driving to the courts, they just gave us this context of things that I don't even think about. And I believe that it influenced the risks that they took on the court in sport, therefore their success rate in certain ways. So just wanted to insert that little thing that you were, like, as you were describing that, I thought, yeah, that is exactly one of the divergence between, let's say, a Canadian player and a Brazilian player. That's a pretty rudimentary.
No, and look, I think history is your friend on this front. History shows that both men and women, particularly men and women of color, have used sport as an elevator out of poverty. So if you look at boxing, right? You look at heavyweight boxing, it's dominated by poor black men who've worked their way through the ranks to make something of themselves in a sporting context. If you look at the Kenya and their marathon runners, that is an incredible way out of poverty for them. So this is nothing new in the world, where sport has been an incredible vehicle to bring people out of poverty and to change, or to do a class transition from the lower class into the middle classes as well. So sport's been a really interesting vehicle, and there's a corollary with entrepreneurialism in that space, because there's an element of risk. Because if you're chasing an athletic dream as a Brazilian soccer or netball or whatever player you are, volleyball player, you're not providing for your family. Your family needs to close ranks around you, and everyone is sacrificing beyond just you yourself. Your whole family is sacrificing for you to chase a dream. And coming back to the earlier point I made, as a white male, that's not something we particularly needed to worry about, because we'd always be okay. And particularly in the West, where we have societal infrastructure such as the welfare system that will catch you if you fall. There's an analogy that I like to use, and it's if you're taking risks, and I forget who said it, it's not my original thought, but I remember it. You're hanging off a tree branch, and you think if you mess up, or the tree branch breaks and your business goes bankrupt, or you yourself burn out, or any number of things happen, that you're going to plummet to the ground and go splat, and you'll just be a red puddle where there used to be a man or a woman. But the reality is that you're hanging onto that branch, and if for whatever reason you fall, your feet only move an inch, and then you're back on the ground. And that's a really useful way of looking at risk when we make it bigger than it is in our minds. And the opinion of our families and our peers, both in a friendship context and in an industry or organizational context, they have the power over us. And we always kick into risk aversion. And I think an entrepreneur, for whatever reason, is not prepared to listen to the opinions of others, or doesn't give them weight to their actions and their choices. So two really different things here. So entrepreneurialism in the first world context, and then of course, punching upwards through poverty with whatever vehicle is available to you, are two really different things, but they're two sides of what I think is the same coin.
I'm so glad you joined those dots, because when you were describing when you were first working at JB Wi-Fi and JB, that's funny. They should have been called JB Wi-Fi. That would have worked better. Hi-Fi. When you were working there and you realized you got exposed to rejection, and then later you spoke about, this idea of risk. I was hoping you'd marry those, because I was thinking that the risk for a lot of people is, what are people going to think of me? How is this going to affect my security and like comfort level? So if somebody is out there with a new idea in their heart, what would you say is the first steps to kind of starting to bring it to market, or doing something about it?
And look, that's really, really easy. And I'm not the first person, nor will I be the last to give this advice, but if you have a dream or an idea that you want to pursue, you have to put everyone's opinions, everyone's thoughts about you in the boot of the car, and then just drive the damn car to where you want to go. Because as soon as you start listening to people who want to bring you down, or want to bring you back to earth, or remind you why things like, family time's important, or this or that. And don't get me wrong, it is. But if people are unwilling to see you sacrifice something for your dream, then they're not the sort of people that you need around you whilst you're pursuing that dream. So I think that is probably the number one thing that holds most people back. And I want to make this point. Some people are wired better than others to deal with the opinions of other people and ignoring them. And it's a spectrum. And we have social anxiety on this end of the spectrum, and we have sociopaths on this end of the spectrum. And you laugh, but humanity is a bell curve. And I'm probably over here on the right of that bell curve, where
he's awful close to sociopath, just so you know.
Yeah.
You guys couldn't see where he was showing you on his bell curve. Just kidding.
On the right-hand side. But for the longest time, I've not really cared about the opinions of other people. And I've come to define that as, I've not cared about the opinions of other people that I don't have respect for. And some people are further right, they just don't care at all. But interestingly, Sarah, on the other side of that same coin, or the other end of that bell curve more accurately, you've got people with high social anxiety who achieve incredible things because they're terrified if they don't do something with their lives, what will their parents or their peers think about them as well? But on both of these ends, these people achieve incredible things within an organizational context and would be terrible as an entrepreneur. And interestingly, these people achieve incredible things under their own steam and without barriers. But if you put them in an organizational context, they're fired within a week. So, it's a really interesting thing about humanity, and human motivation.
Thank you for that curve, because I think it helps contextualize, firstly, where you may lie. But I always like curves because it allows me to see where you can go, meaning I believe you can move within those things. And, Nat, I know why you and Nat are great friends, because the thing that I've often said is, I loosely say she doesn't care what people think. And living with someone for 18 years like that has given me a freedom, has shown me what freedom there is in that. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I do believe it's intricately linked with entrepreneurship. And we interviewed a monk on our section about focus. And one of the steps, like step 4, was sacrifice, which is what you just brought up, like the sacrifices that are embedded when you're actually going for something. So, I mean, yeah, you'd probably enjoy that, actually, what he had to say. It was really thought-provoking. He's amazing.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great. He's amazing. He's now a Hindu priest, and he has a baby, so he's left the monastery. But it lives in New York City. Really cool. Debunks lots of myths. Love that about him. So one of the things that I know you do is you support a lot of startups. So to me, I'm going to make an assumption here. To me, a startup is lots of risk, so there's lots of risk. And then we're going to move hats here for a sec. So you've been the guy starting out, but now you invest in those guys starting up. So if I am a startup, what would I have to do to attract your attention?
Oh, God. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delink the financial and the business structure side, because I don't think that's what you want to hear. I think for this conversation, you really want to hear what I'm looking for in the founder. And so number one, I need to believe in the founder. And I need to believe that the founder can take the same sort of journey that a pro athlete can, that a respected entrepreneur can, and that an engineer can, to going through to being an astronaut for NASA. So they all require a hard road. They all require sacrifice. They all require incredible amounts of rejection and picking yourself up and dusting yourself off. And in an athletic context or an engineering context or a business context, they all manifest differently physically, but they all have the same toll on a person intellectually and emotionally. So number one, I need to believe in that founder. And there's a couple of things I look for. So number one is passion. And passion is so incredibly important, because that is your jet fuel. And if you've got a big tank filled with jet fuel, it can carry you anywhere. So I always look for passion with regards to what they're doing. Number two, I look for focus. And coming back to the previous interview that you had to this one, focus is incredibly important, because what that says to me is that you believe in yourself, and you believe in it so much that you're willing to focus on it to the point of sacrifice of other things that most other humans find important, such as earning a good wage, going out for dinner, having some beers after work, having a child, or pursuing a marriage. Those sorts of things are things that you're willing to sacrifice on the altar of your ambition and vision. And then thirdly, they have to be human. I have to be able to empathize with them, and I need to be able to relate to them, because they're going to see. Can I swear on your show?
Yes. Nat does. Great. All the time.
Cool. Good. So they're going to see some shit, right? And I've seen some shit. And I know for a fact that you guys have seen some shit in your professional sporting careers as well. And that could be injury. That could be a massive rejection from an investor. Or that could be, in the case of the astronaut that I used, you could have been breezed over for someone else who's less qualified because their dad happens to be a senator in Parliament or the like. So those sorts of things, you need the ability to connect with the person that you're investing in and help them through that. And without getting too deep, I believe that there's a master-student paradigm, and masters have responsibilities to students to help them through those things, and students have responsibilities to masters to implement the learnings that the masters then give them, which is a bit esoteric, and we can talk about that another time. But they're the three things: is passion, focus, and they need to be human. I have to be able to relate to them.
Awesome. That's great. I hope everybody heard how, yes, there's, like you said, the monetary, the financials and things like that, but you went straight to the founder, who's going to be there. We had another businessman talking about how he creates his story of his business over and over again. And he talked about how you're the founder, you're going to be there at the beginning and the end. His claim is everybody else is going to leave at some point. Every customer, every client at some point. So basically, design this thing how you want it to be, because you're going to be there for every step of the way. And I thought, it was really interesting because, again, you're bringing up this idea of the founder and the critical element. Who's going to be there to sacrifice? Who's the human that's going to go through the shit? But it was nice of you to do 3 in a row. That was good. Get it all in. But yeah, like, who's going to be there? Not left holding the bag, because that sounds negative, but in a way that if that person is left holding the bag, what are they going to do with it? And so that, what I realized in talking to you is that I had 100 other things I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
However, it took the course it was meant to take. It always does. So in deciding what my last question is for you, of the many, because I would love to talk to you again if you're cool with that, bring you back
of course.
under another banner, if you're happy. Put a new hat on you, dance you around again. I want to talk just for 1 second about the tech age, because it seems like you're keeping pace, but actually you're staying ahead of the curve. So, Nat used the word leading edge when she thinks about you. How do you do that? Like, how do you stay ahead of what everybody else is doing?
God, that's tough. The short answer to that is that you don't. And no one can. No one has enough hours in the day to be on the edge of every technology and see every opportunity as it comes. The reality is that there's an old marketing adage, and I'll pull it out because it's one of my favorites, and you often hear it used in traditional cultures as well. But I always say to people, when we're talking a marketing context, you've got 2 of these and 1 of these, and you need to use it in the same ratio. So if you're asked about
2 ears and 1 mouth, everybody.
2 ears and 1 mouth, thank you. So you need to do a lot of listening, and you then need to work out who is worth listening to, and then you need to work out who is worth listening to often, because there is an unlimited number of opinions out there on things. I'm sorry, this is quite a roundabout way of answering this question. I stay on top of the things that relate to the things that I'm already good at.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. I'm not an athlete. I look after my body, I exercise, and I eat well, but I'm never going to be an Olympian. All right. So when it comes to things like sports technology and human performance and the like, I have no point of reference personally. But when it comes to how people buy things, how people choose to engage with a product or a service, that's technology that I'm interested in. And because I've got a frame of reference, I keep a really active radar, and I'm pointing to my 2 ears again, before I start using my mouth and telling people what's what. So I think that's probably the best way for me to answer that. If I'm leading edge, it's within a really narrow vertical, and I channel my energies about learning about new stuff in the areas that I can make a difference or influence the world.
I noticed that with your company. When I went to your website for your agency, Kinetic, I noticed that there was a focus. It wasn't like, hey, we can help everybody do everything. It was like, it was in this acronym that I had to look up, because I was like, what the heck is fast moving? So FMT Fast-moving products,
See-
basically.
Yeah, consumer goods, FMCG.
CG. I was like, does everybody know what this is? I'm Googling that. So anyways, I just noticed that you had a focus
Yeah,
and what you're
for
doing.
sure. So, and look, what that means is for people listening is I won't sell Toyotas or a mobile phone plan or help a politician get elected to parliament. They use similar parts of the same skill set that I have and that the team that I've built has. But we really focus on consumer goods, and that's things that you find in the supermarket, a pharmacy. When you go out for a drink, they're on the back of the bar, and that sort of stuff. So we really narrow, and we aim to be the best in our field. And it's no different. And we'll come back to a sporting allegory. It's no different to being the very, 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 very best at volleyball. You need to have explosive muscle power to get across the sand really quickly. You need to have hand-eye coordination. You're an incredible athlete, but if you took an athlete that was the best at volleyball and you asked them to do a marathon, whilst they're still an athlete, they're no way going to be the best at the marathon. So it's just a different, it's a different space. One's human performance and one is marketing and creativity, but the same rules apply. Focus begets effectiveness in pretty much all realms of life. So
I want to write that down.
I don't think anything is new.
Sorry, I'm writing it. I hope everyone out there is writing this. Focus begets effectiveness. Sorry. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I'm writing it right now. There we go. So honestly, Mark, I feel that all the themes that you've introduced are linked beautifully. And as someone might be having a dream or an idea that they want to make manifest, I think that you've given them a great place to start, because you've let them know what they have to look like as a founder. If I hope people pick that up, you've just got it's almost character building. It's like, who do I have to be, or who do I have to become in order to align with this idea that I want to bring to market? So I really appreciate, and now I know exactly what Nat and I are going to banter about. It's going to be all about caring what people think and that curve, because it'll be perfect, because Nat and I lie on different areas of the curve. And I think that we can have a really funny conversation about that. But but I really appreciate you. I'm not lying that I have all these other things. I wanted to talk about how you cultivate team dynamic, within the agency, and there was more.
We can do that at another time. It's I'm more than happy to jump back in at another time and awesome. Dig into those. They're all really rich veins to mine. So let's set up another time.
Do I have to write that down? Rich veins.
No.
Nat says to me, he uses really good words and adjectives. And so I was like, oh, rich veins to mine. So I have to remember that. That was a winner right there. Way to end it beautifully. I thank you so much. You're as good as she said.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
God, give her my love, by the way. I miss her dearly.
Mwah.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. Don't forget to join the community at bit.ly/The Nat and Sarah Show to download your 3-step journal and participate in weekly lives found only in our private group.
Hold on. You've got to rate and review the show. And I know all the podcasts are always asking this, and in the past, I wasn't doing it. And the reason I wasn't doing it is because I actually didn't know how to do it. So, open your podcast player and click on our show from your library, not the Listen Now. That's where I was going wrong in the past. So now that you know how to do it,
when you go there, make sure you give us a 5-star review. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. And then click on write a review link to actually write a review so that you can tell other people that we're legit and even funny, maybe a bit serious.
So if you want to recommend this to someone, you have to put your fingers on the keys and send us a review.
Thanks.